Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. Professor Simonetta Torresi guides us through a thought-provoking re-examination of one of the most iconic centers of the Carolingian world, Aquisgrana, the seat of Charlemagne. Drawing on geography, toponymy, notarial archives, legal formulas, noble genealogies, and long-standing local traditions, she explores the hypothesis that the imperial capital may not have been located in present-day Aachen, but in the Val di Chienti, in central Italy. From Salic Law documents in 10th century archives to the diffusion of the Paladin legends across the Marche, Umbria, and even Sicily, Professor Torresi reconstructs a layered and complex historical landscape. The discussion also engages with broader questions about medieval chronology, archaeological stratification, and the relationship between documented history and epic memory, from the Chanson de Roland to the Arthurian cycle. If Charlemagne established his seat at Aachen, it is only natural that these counts palatine would gravitate around that territory, or at least within the area of the imperial capital. Official historiography identifies Aachen with the German city of Aachen. Yet when the site is examined closely, several inconsistencies emerge. The throne attributed to Charlemagne, displayed in the Palatine Chapel, is considered by various scholars to be inauthentic. The emperor's tomb has never been definitively identified. Above all, archaeological excavations beneath the site have not revealed structures clearly predating the 10th century. If earlier stratigraphic layers are absent, it becomes difficult to attribute what stands above ground with certainty to the Carolingian period. Even the location of Otto III's tomb does not fully correspond to documentary descriptions. Altogether, the site does not present the coherent picture one would expect from an 8th or 9th century imperial capital. The analysis then shifts to geography. When one looks at Aachen on a map, it lies in western Germany, relatively close to the North Sea. If one traces an imaginary route from there to Constantinople, the journey unfolds entirely by land. There is no stretch of sea separating the two areas. It is a continuous overland route. This detail clashes with an episode reported by Alessandro Barbero in his book Charlemagne, page 141. According to Barbero, the emperor, contemplating the sea that separated his dominions from those of the Byzantine Empire, is said to have exclaimed, "Ah, if only that pool of water were not there, we could divide the treasures of the East." But what pool of water could possibly lie between Aachen and Constantinople if the route is entirely terrestrial? Another factor must be added. Several scholars describe that era as climatically harsh, almost glacial. If that were the case, Aachen would have been located in a rigid northern climate, even less compatible with the image of an emperor standing before a narrow sea and gazing eastward. An alternative hypothesis is therefore considered, that Aquisgrana was not Aachen, but was located in the Val di Chienti, in the Marche region of central Italy. Here, the geographical picture changes dramatically. From the elevated points of the area, one can see the Adriatic Sea, a relatively narrow stretch of water, almost a small sea. In this context, the expression pool of water takes on a concrete meaning. From a high vantage point, one can indeed see the opposite shore and imagine the east just beyond that strip of sea. From geography, the discussion moves to toponymy. If the Counts Palatine operated within a specific territory, it is plausible that traces of them would remain in place names. The Paladin par excellence is Orlando, also known as Rinaldo. In the area we find Monte Rinaldo, in the province of Fermo, not far from the Chieti River, which marks the boundary with the province of Macerata. Another Paladin is Otto. There is a Monte Ottone. Azzolino appears as well. We find Grotta Azzolina. Milone is mentioned. Present-day Pollenza was known as Monte Milone before the unification of Italy. Beringer, Marquis of Camerino in the Carolingian era, is connected to Camerino itself, which lies precisely in this area. As for Oliver, there is no surviving castle bearing his name, but the surname Olivieri is extremely widespread in the provinces of Macerata and Fermo. Taken together, these place names form a surprisingly coherent constellation around the Val di Chienti. Each Count Palatine seems to have a territorial reference point. Even the surname Paladini is deeply rooted in the area, a sign of memory transmitted across generations. The traditions linked to the deeds of the Paladins are not confined to this valley, but spread into neighboring territories. In Gubbio, a city historically more connected to the Marche area than to Umbria, numerous legends about Orlando circulate. The cultural history of the city, from the Ugubine tablets to the ancient confederations of Umbrian and Marchigian cities, places it within a sphere that has dialogued with the Marche for centuries. In Perugia, a legend recounts that Oliver was captured by a pagan and imprisoned in the Etruscan arch. Orlando came to free him, defeated the usurper, and camped on the site where a church dedicated to Saint Michael the Archangel would later rise. Until the 16th century, that church was known as the Rotunda di Orlando, clear evidence of a chivalric tradition rooted in the territory. The diffusion of Paladin traditions reaches as far as Sicily, through the Sicilian puppet theater and through the figure of Saint Rosalia, patron saint of Palermo, believed to be descended from Charlemagne through the Sinibaldi family. Moving northward, during the Renaissance courts, the Carolingian cycle was taken up and reworked. Ludovico Ariosto, in Orlando Furioso, traces the house of Este back to Bradamante and Ruggiero. Matteo Maria Bardo reaffirms the same genealogy in Orlando Innamorato. Torquato Tasso, in Jerusalem Delivered, links the lineage to Rinaldo. Had this been merely celebratory invention, it would have been simpler to claim direct descent from Charlemagne himself. The choice of collateral figures suggests a more layered and possibly older tradition. Finally, many noble families in the Marche still claim French or German origins, linking themselves to the Carolingian orbit. Among them is the Ferretti family of Ancona, whose palace now houses the National Archaeological Museum of the Marche. What emerges is no longer a collection of isolated elements. Geography, toponymy, oral tradition, and noble genealogies begin to form a coherent pattern. Upon this pattern rests the hypothesis that Aquisgrana may not have been located in Aachen, but in the Val di Chienti. At this point, the emerging picture is strengthened by a decisive element: law. If a Frankish aristocracy truly settled in the Marche region, then the ruling population should have lived according to Salic Law. This is not a marginal detail. Salic Law was the legal code of the Franks, a precise marker of identity. Here the notarial archives become crucial. From the notarial archive of Macerata, particularly concerning the Potenza Valley, the river north of the Chienti, with the city of Macerata situated between the two watercourses, a recurring and unequivocal formula appears in 10th century documents. Francus, de genere Francorum, ca ad legem Salicum vivit. A Frank, of the stock of the Franks, who lives according to Salic Law. In the 10th century, not in a much later era, but in full continuity with the Carolingian age, if individuals in this territory explicitly declare themselves Franks and specify that they live under Salic Law, this implies the presence of a structured and self-aware Frankish elite. Linguistic transformation provides another suggestive clue. In the Marche dialectal evolution, the intervocalic T often becomes voiced into a D. Thus, Palatino can become Paladino. This is not merely a casual phonetic variation. It reflects a coherent local linguistic development. The Counts Palatine become, in narrative memory, the Paladins. An additional element, seemingly secondary yet intriguing, concerns dietary customs. The Frankish aristocracy traditionally consumed beer. When they drank wine, they favored white wine, considering red wine too similar to blood. Significantly, in the belt between Macerata and the Val di Chienti, the historical grape varieties are almost exclusively white. The Bianco dei Colli Maceratici derived from Verdicchio. Coincidence? Perhaps. But when coincidences begin to accumulate, the question becomes legitimate. Within this broader tapestry, a personal element also emerges. A great-grandmother bearing the surname Ferretti gave her daughters names connected to the Habsburg family, such as Zita of Bourbon-Parma, wife of Charles of Habsburg. The detail evokes both emotion and curiosity. How could she have known those genealogies so precisely? Why choose those names? Connections appear to surface from multiple directions, intertwining family memory and dynastic history. An inevitable comparison then arises, that between Charlemagne's paladins and the knights of King Arthur. The two traditions frequently overlap in the collective imagination, but a clear distinction is necessary. The Arthurian narratives belong to a more legendary, semi-mythical dimension. The Knights of the Round Table seek the Holy Grail, the cup of Christ's blood. Arthur's figure is symbolically linked to the sword in the stone, in Italy paralleled by the Rotunda di Montesipi near San Galgano in Tuscany, a powerful tradition, yet belonging to a different and earlier narrative structure. The Carolingian exploits, by contrast, are recorded in chronicles. Charlemagne fights against the Moors, against pagans, and organizes concrete military campaigns. The Counts Palatine are historically attested figures. Names may shift in literary tradition, but the political structure itself is recognized in the sources. The element shared by Arthur and Charlemagne is not identity, but an institutional model. The primus inter pares, first among equals. Arthur sits at a round table to avoid visual hierarchies among his knights. Charlemagne surrounds himself with Counts Palatine who, though subordinate, participate in a collegial dimension of power. It is a functional resemblance, not a conflation of figures. Medieval representations in northern Italy illustrate how these narrative cycles became intertwined over the centuries. On the facade of the Cathedral of Modena appear scenes interpreted as belonging to the Arthurian cycle. In Mantua, within the ducal apartments, halls are frescoed with knights and chivalric narratives. Ferrara, Modena, and Mantua were fundamental centers in transmitting both the Carolingian and Arthurian cycles between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It is therefore unsurprising that their iconographies overlap and dialogue with one another. Yet the central point remains this. While the Arthurian cycle moves within a widely diffused European mythic sphere, here, between the Marche and Umbria, we encounter notarial documents, place names, local traditions, noble genealogies, linguistic traces, and even cultural customs that converge toward the presence of a structured and rooted Frankish aristocracy. It is upon this documentary ground, not upon legend, that the boldest assertion rests. Aquisgrana was not located in Aachen, but in the Val di Chienti. Toward the end of the discussion, a broader question emerges. What are we to think of historical chronology as we know it? Does it need to be radically revised? The answer is cautious but clear. The overall chronological framework is not rejected. There may be errors, adjustments, and shadowy areas, but the idea that 1,000 years of history are missing does not appear plausible. The reason is concrete: material stratification. When excavations are carried out in Italy, in the Marche, in Umbria, and elsewhere, distinct layers appear one above the other: the Piscine layer, the Roman layer, the late antique layer, the medieval layer, the Renaissance layer. The stratifications are visible. One cannot erase an entire millennium without the ground revealing the absence. Bricks, in the end, make the difference. If they are there, something existed. If they are not, then questions must be asked. The Middle Ages are not an invention. They did exist, here, where material and documentary traces are abundant. The issue, if anything, concerns the geographical placement of certain centers of power, not the passage of time itself. The reference to Anatoly Fomenko's theory is approached with caution. Before even evaluating its conclusions, one must understand its context, who supported it, with what funding, within what academic networks. Eliminating entire centuries is a radically different operation from reconsidering historical geography. Here, years are not being cut away, coordinates are being shifted. Once again, the documents return to the foreground. Medieval archives are immense. A great deal was written. The so-called Dark Ages are not devoid of sources. On the contrary, the sheer volume of documentation allows for detailed reconstruction. Without those sources, even an alternative reading would not be possible. The comparison with France and Germany therefore shifts to the material plane. In some cities, symbolic monuments, Palatine chapels, great cathedrals, have been reconstructed, but the surrounding urban fabric does not always display the same continuous stratification found in Italy. This is not a denial of restoration or rebuilding, which are well documented. The question is different. How can something be defined as originally medieval when it is known to have been erected or reconstructed in a much later period? The example of Notre Dame in Paris becomes emblematic. The 19th century restorations are well known and documented. But where are the material traces of earlier structures? And where is the Church of Saint Stephen, the first Merovingian church of Paris, which sources state once stood beside Notre Dame? If a foundation is attested in texts yet leaves no visible trace in the subsoil, the question remains open. Another decisive chapter concerns the Gothic War, a dramatic and thoroughly studied period. Procopius speaks of thousands of Piceni who perished. According to a local tradition reported by the historian Colucci, the casus belli directly involves Fermo. After the death of Theodoric the Great, his daughter Amalasuntha, left without political protection, settled in Fermo, in the highest part of the city where the cathedral now stands. From there unfolded dynastic intrigues, appeals for assistance to the Eastern Emperor, and military interventions. When Amalasuntha was killed on the island of Martana, in Lake Bolsena, the Gothic War erupted. Once again, central Italy appears not as a periphery, but as a fulcrum. The discussion then returns to a suggestive question. What connection might exist between the Carolingian lands of central Italy and Sicily, where the tradition of the puppet theater has so powerfully preserved the Carolingian cycle? The hypothesis is simple, because battles were fought there. Oral traditions do not arise from nothing. If the memory of the Paladins is so deeply rooted in Sicily, perhaps it derives from an actual presence, from real military campaigns. After all, Charlemagne fought in Barcelona, and in Sicily there is a town called Barcellona Pozzo di Gotto. Coincidence? Perhaps, but the lines of continuity deserve attention. Finally, the reflection turns once more to the symbolic dimension. The Chanson de Roland tells of the defeated hero who, before dying, blows the Oliphant until it breaks, in a desperate attempt to warn Charlemagne. The Oliphant, originally carved from an elephant's tusk and engraved with scenes of hunting and combat, is both instrument and symbol, a tangible object that traverses the poem as a sign of loyalty and sacrifice. Durendal, Roland's sword, accompanies the hero like a faithful companion. Its origins vary across traditions. Forged by a legendary smith, given by Charlemagne, delivered by an angel, even said in some versions to have belonged to Hector of Troy. Genealogies overlap, myths intertwine. One may then imagine a long line of continuity, from the Homeric heroes to the Carolingian paladins, and onward to the Knights of the Round Table, reshaped by troubadours and bards. Not an isolated echo, but a narrative thread crossing centuries, changing form while preserving memory. And upon this thread the reflection closes. History is not merely a list of dates. It is a weave of places, documents, material stratifications, oral traditions, genealogies, and symbols. When observed carefully, these elements can still surprise us, not in order to deny time, but to reconsider its coordinates. See you soon on Compelling Topics with the very origin of Europe.